Welcome back. I'm Roy with Rugged Badger Racing and Team Parts Badger. Behind me is our Champ Car Miata. We are preparing this for a race at Gingerman Raceway with the Champ Car Endurance Series in a few weeks. We're calling this series 80 Hours to Gingerman. We have 80 hours to prepare this car to race between now and race time, and we currently have 53 hours of the project remaining. Something really excited today. Something actually came a little bit sooner than we expected. Let me show you. All right, so I'm here in our shop and I have exciting news. Our motor came and it is in a gigantic box. So I don't know what the heck they sent me. Hopefully it's the right motor, but let's get this thing unboxed and take a look. Here it is. So it does in fact look like they sent me the right motor. So I'm gonna get this thing off the pallet, get it on the Jeep, and then we'll take it to the shop. And here it is, our new motor. I'm really happy that we got this one in particular. It has roughly 85,000 miles. It has really good compression. Now, normally with the old car, we would always run rebuilt motors. This time, the motor produces so much torque. I'm not too worried about having a motor at peak performance. I'm gonna be happy with just getting this thing in the car, and it looks in great condition. There's no visible leaks. Really all we have to do is start swapping parts over, and I think this thing will be ready to go in the car. So let's dive in. All right, I got most of the stuff off that's not supposed to be on here. Before I move parts over from our other motor onto this one, what I want to do is a leak down test. And I just want to confirm it had good compression when I bought it. I just want to make sure there's no surprises, and a leak down test will give me a lot of confidence in overall engine health. So I'm going to do that real quick. It shouldn't take too long, and then we'll start moving on and getting parts swapped over. All right, that took a couple minutes, but we're ready to go. So I found top dead center using cylinder 4, because 4 and 1 should be top dead center. I have a giant breaker bar here to hold the cylinder as well in position so that it doesn't push down. And luckily I'm done having kids. We'll see how this goes. I'll hold that between my legs here. Let's plug it in and see what we got here. Oh wow, that is phenomenal. I have no leak down in this one at all. Let's just move the piston a little bit, see what happens here. Oh fuck, there we go. That's like 0% leak down on cylinder 1, that's amazing. So what I wanna do is go 1 full rotation, and then I'll go back into cylinder 4 here. Apologize if the compressor ticks on here. I cannot believe I didn't have any leak down in cylinder 1, like nothing. Maybe 1%. Unbelievable. Cylinder 4 is really good too. Now I'm gonna move over to 3 and 2, and then I wanna rotate the engine 180 degrees. So that should be bottom dead center right now. There we go, now we're getting some leak down. Now generally I'm gonna wanna have a little higher pressure, but it looks like I'm around 58 in and 57 out. So maybe like 4%, 5%, something like that in cylinder 2. Now, see if this just stays at top dead center. I think it depends where it is in the cam cycle. Yeah, that one's fine. So I didn't need to turn it 360. And again, this thing's perfect. That is unfreaking believable. Now normally, granted, we race the Miata motors, but after even the first event, I mean, I'm looking at, probably at least 4% leak down across, and then usually one's a little bit worse, but this thing's in impeccable condition. So I don't know if the Ecotecs are just really good motors, or if I got super lucky by getting this one with 80-some thousand miles. I will say that the hardware on here was super easy to get off. It all looks phenomenal, but I think we're gonna have a really strong motor here. So fingers crossed that we can seal the oil pan and make sure that this thing continues to have oil and we don't blow it up, because this thing's, I mean, it really seems like a beautiful engine. And the spark plugs look really good too. Now, when they did the compression test, they would have taken them out, so there's only so much data I could get from the spark plugs, but they look fine. No issues there. So all in all, good motor. All right, making some really good progress. I have the engine here with the oil pan that's ready to come off. I took a wire brush to it and it is in rough shape. So we're gonna take a look at this thing once I get it off, see if we're gonna use this or if we're gonna switch over to the spare pan. Everything on this motor is going really well. Got the oil pressure sender adapter in place, the coolant plug, and then there's also coolant adapters here and here. Everything gets wire brushed and then brake cleaned. And then I use Right Stuff sealant, which works really well. Make sure everything has a nice, good seal on it. It needs to be flat, clean, no debris or anything like that, and then properly torqued. So far, so good. Let's get this oil pan off. All right, got the oil pan off. Good news and bad news. So good news is we know exactly what it was. And I'll show you right here. This is cylinder number 1. That's me moving the bearing. And I know it's a bearing because I found it in the oil pan. So you can see these pieces here completely fried that rod bearing. So that was likely oil starvation that would have caused that. And then all of this crap then gets picked up by the strainer and the oil pump, and in particular it's all in the oil pan. So some of it I picked up off the bottom of the oil pan, and it's I can feel it. It's really gritty. So I don't think I'm gonna run this oil pan. It needs a really thorough cleaning before it goes on a motor. So now I'm gonna have to go back to the shop, grab that spare oil pan, because that's what's gonna go on the new motor. First, I'm going to take the oil pan off the new motor, just make sure everything looks good there, and then probably take a trip, go get that oil pan. All right, making really good progress. Let me show you what I found. So first off, I cleaned this surface. First, I cleaned up the oil. I plugged the oil pump intake, the front timing chain area. I went around with a gasket scraper, went around with a razor blade scraper. I went around with a brass brush, being careful not to get any bristles in any important areas here. And then I went around with a lint-free cloth with brake clean, clean this all up. Something interesting I found is that this front gasket on the oil pump housing actually stood up a little bit higher than this stack. And that's a big problem on the Ecotec oil pan, because the Ecotec oil pan is flat and it extends out the front, where on the stock oil pan it just ends. So on the stock oil pan there would have been a gap. On this one there's not, so I had to grind that down. Now I couldn't really tell because there's so much crud on this one if this had the same issue. Second thing that I want to be careful of is these areas here, because again that pan is a little bit longer. Just make sure these are nice and flat. They look nasty, but it is. Now the main area of concern on the Ecotec is right here. That's the oil pump intake. And you have to have a really good seal around here, because if you lose seal, you lose oil pressure. So around here, if you have a leak, your oil pan leaks, but you don't lose oil pressure. This will blow your motor if that breaks. And there's really no good support within here either. When you look at the pan design, you can actually see how the silicone was adhered here, and I have a nice thick bead. So this bead actually rolled up likely into that oil intake area and didn't form a proper seal like it did over here. Over here it likely pulled up because it actually was sealed and adhered between the pan and the engine. And the silicone that isn't here was probably left on the engine. Take a look and you can kind of see that here. But you end up with sealing issues because there's nothing really supporting this. It's just not a good design overall. And the way that this pan is designed, it probably should use a gasket. Now, GM didn't seem to have a gasket from the factory, but I know you can make custom ones, and it would probably be a good idea to make custom ones for this, but I do not have enough time. So it's cleaned up the best I can get it. I'm gonna go grab that oil pan. Let's see if I can get that on. Hopefully I can get a nice seal using Right Stuff, a nice consistent layer. So that's what I'll do next. All right, I'm back at the shop now. Unfortunately, I have really bad news. So I was prepped for the oil pan. I went to my office to grab the oil pan that was there. I brought it there to actually check flatness because I know flatness is an issue on these. When I brought the pan back, checking that, it's a significant issue. So I have the spare pan here and I have the pan that was in the car. First, let's check that. And I have this on the oil pump location and then mating further down on the oil pan here, and you can see the gap that starts to form here. It's a really significant gap on this oil pan, and what that's going to do, see that really start to form there, that's going to cause sealing issues. And I have the same thing on the spare pan, which I actually measured. I measured this gap, and this gap came out to nearly 1/8 of an inch. So my plan was, okay, if I have flatness issues, I'll just put this on a mill it down. But the gap is so significant. There's not enough material to remove in the flange itself, because this thickness, I can't take 1/8 of an inch out of this thickness and have this still work. I'm at a complete standstill. I've dedicated about 3 hours to the oil pan alone and trying to figure out this solution. I got 47 hours remaining on this project, and we are in trouble. We do not have a good plan here. So unfortunately, I think I gotta leave this video there. We'll see, hopefully we come up with a bright idea, and I can, present whatever that is in a follow-up video.